Hello, my friend. Here we are with some more courage to be, this time from Paul Tillich. Now, Paul Tillich was a German theologian who found refuge in the USA to escape from the Nazis in the 30s. And he brought with him to the United States lots of ideas that came with him from people like Jaspers and Heidegger, and he made his own conclusions out of that. He was quite inspired by Kierkegaard and Nietzsche too, and then created a way of working with that which was quite American in a way. He came up with a kind of unified idea about what it means to have the courage to be, and he wrote the masterpiece text on it called The Courage to Be, a book to read for sure. He was also Rollo May's teacher, and I'll do one on Rollo May later on. So for Tillich, what is new and different about existential courage is that he sees it as an ontological necessity. In other words, you cannot live without it. In other words, you need to learn how to have this self-affirmation when you're in the face of a threat, when you're in the face of the possibility of non-being. You need to learn to find your existential courage, because that's the only way to overcome continuous anxiety that might otherwise dissolve you or destroy you completely. And Tillich saw that anxiety was growing. Little did he know, we're talking about, 3/4 of a century back. And since then, anxiety has just carried on growing in our civilization. So he is more relevant than he ever was. So Tillich showed in his book that there are several different forms of existential anxiety, that human existence is permanently threatened by non-being. There is a threat that you will be destroyed and that you will die. There is a threat that things will become meaningless and will therefore feel like they're being undone. And there is a threat of your erasure, of you becoming irrelevant in the world. So each of these leads to a certain type of anxiety. So first is the ontological anxiety, which is the anxiety of your mortality, the anxiety that you will die and that you're finite. This is really a physical threat to your existence, the realization that your body will fail, it will fall ill, it will decay, and you will eventually have a body that stops and that you have to leave behind. The existential challenge is, how can you continue to live a vital, vibrant kind of life in the face of that threat? And his other threat is the anxiety of meaninglessness and emptiness, which is the spiritual anxiety. So that is the feeling that your emptiness is the loss of value, is the loss of the beliefs that you hold dear. It is the loss of your projects, as Sartre would say, of your ultimate concern, as Jasper might say, the feeling that nothing matters and that the universe is indifferent to this fact. The existential challenge is that you need to become aware that your anxiety is linked with this fear of emptiness, and that comes partially for no longer having the structures like religions that used to hold you within a network of meaning, and leaving you having to find your own way of finding meaning and the stamina to create something of value in this void. And then there is the anxiety of guilt and condemnation, the moral anxiety, which is when we're aware that we are responsible for our choices and that we can't blame them on anybody else, and that we frequently fail our own ethical standards. And this is the thing so many people miss. So many people deal with this anxiety about guilt and condemnation by standing in judgment of other people. I see it all the time, it's even standing in judgment of dead people, judging all of the philosophers. Oh, it's so easy to do. You can find everything wrong with Kierkegaard or Nietzsche or Frankl indeed as well, or Sartre or Heidegger. I mean, they are real simple targets to take down. But this stops you thinking about your own ethical standards and thinking about your own alienation in this world. And this is what Tillich said we needed to do. We have to find a way to affirm ourselves when we actually feel profoundly flawed, which we all are, and therefore we become very frightened of being judged or guilty of wasting our lives. Do we get out of that by accusing others? No, clearly that's not the way to go. It's more about recognizing where this failing morality comes from. So Tillich goes into this quite deeply, and he outlines ways in which we can become self-affirming, to be sensitive, he says, to the balance, the paradoxical balance between your capacity for self-affirmation and your ultimate destruction. It's a bit like de Beauvoir's ambiguity. It's to be aware that you have to manage these threats and these oppositions, these polarities and these conflicts in your life all the time. You cannot avoid it. For him, the courage to be comes out of either participating with others or affirming your individuality. And Tillich, at the end of the day, believed we have to do both to some extent. So participation is obviously finding a group to belong to, an idea, a community, a movement, a nation, or a church. Something bigger beyond yourself you can belong to. Belonging to that group is a buffer against the anxiety of failing and dying and things being meaningless, because the group will go beyond yourself. So there is a sense of safety in that. The risk of it is that you can become taken over by the group. It can become a totalitarian group because it feels it has too much power and it can overpower the individual in it. And the other danger is herd mentality, becoming part of the crowd and having conformity and losing your creative capacity. But there are problems with individualization as well. So the individual solution is to stand completely alone, to claim your radical freedom in a sort of Sartrean way, and to resist the pressure of the collective, not in a late Sartre way. The courage of the solitary existential hero, like Nietzsche's Übermensch, really, his overman, his superman, or Sartre's authentic individual, is a danger because it can lead to profound isolation and alienation, and to a descent into nihilism, to sever all your connections with others, with the ground of life. So ultimately, for Tillich, you need to synthesize these. You need to both affirm yourself and be part of a group, but not to do either in an extreme way. It is, he thought, this fanaticism of either standing alone or going with the group, that fanaticism, that is what leads to trouble. So, for Tillich, as a theologian, of course, the true solution is more a Kierkegaardian solution, or a solution like Marcel's. It is to acceptance. It is to accept that there is a ground of being which is the divine beyond gods. That there is a ground of being that out of which everything on earth is created. And he doesn't believe in a God that is like an old man in the sky, but he does believe that there is an infinite power of existence that is eternal and infinite, and that transcends all our human troubles. So the ultimate act of courage for Tillich is to be aware when you feel completely wrecked by heartbreak, or shipwrecked by it even, and he uses that term, and you feel everything has become meaningless, or when you feel condemned and doomed by others and emptied out, the ultimate act of courage is to feel that being still pulses through you, that you are still connected to what is left beyond the destruction of all these human things, and to feel that you are accepted by life, despite feeling temporarily, hopefully, unacceptable. So that is the true affirmation of existence for Tillich, which, arises when all intellectual, social, political solution, or even solutions of love and tenderness have collapsed. Then there is still the capacity for finding the spirit that moves you beyond these earthly preoccupations. At that point, it becomes possible to surrender to vitality. So that's an interesting one. So Heidegger also spoke about surrender, but he spoke about surrender to being. But Tillich spoke about surrender to vitality, to the force of being inside of yourself. That leads to the capacity to stand at the edge of the abyss of absolute meaninglessness, and to look down in the abyss instead of avoiding it or going away from it, and to realize that the very fact that you're capable of standing at the edge of the abyss is that you are greater than the void. You are part of the power of being that can observe the void and the abyss. And this is what allows you to say yes to existence and to know that you have inside of yourself the vital power to find grace, the saving grace, which is that of the pulsing life that runs through you, my friend. Tillich is a golden thread towards overcoming. Read that little book, The Courage to Be.